Russian Medvedev throws nuclear glove towards the United States. Trump in return sends nuclear submarines towards Medvedev, just in case it's not just a binge talking. Is America ready for going nuclear? Is Russia ready? Who is ready after all? Who is not? And where Ukraine stands in all of that? Today we try to find out that and more, talking to United States Air Force veteran who served as a nuclear and missile operations officer, a fine speaker and a great expert. I give you Mr. Jake Broe. Hello, Jake. Thank you so very much for finding time and joining us.
Hi, Henry. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Right, well, let's go. Russia lifts ban on mid and short-range missile deployment. That, and Medvedev, of course, doesn't go unnoticed. Washington and the US deploys nuclear subs closer to the Russian coast in response. When we're looking at all that's happening, what are we actually looking at, Jake? Is that nuclear muscle show or new arms race era, maybe something else?
Couple components having to do with nuclear weapons. The first one, Russia says they're going to start developing and deploying medium-range ballistic missiles that are nuclear capable. This was a strategic arms control agreement that we achieved during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States. Medium-range ballistic missiles don't benefit the United States. Who are we going to threaten? We're going to threaten to nuke Canada or Mexico.
Right.
So this was a huge political win for NATO and the United States because Russia benefits from developing shorter-range ballistic missile technology.
Right.
They can threaten their neighbors in Eastern Europe. They can threaten their neighbors in the Middle East or Caucasus, as well as Central Asia. So, of course, Putin wants this capability because threats and intimidation is how he thinks he can achieve his political goals. Concerning the nukes and the submarines, Medvedev is supposed to be the more extreme alternative to Putin. It's his job to go on social media and to sound insane so that Putin appears to be the more reasonable political actor that we should be talking to and negotiating with. The problem with Donald Trump is he describes himself as a counterpuncher. So anybody who says anything that is hostile or aggressive towards him, his instinct, he doesn't think it through. He just says whatever he's going to say. So for Trump to say he's going to deploy nuclear submarines, nuclear weapon capable submarines within striking distance of Russia,
But
I think the range of the Trident missiles is 7,000 kilometers. So when I heard Trump say that, I said, well, we more than likely already have submarines within striking distance of Russia. The purpose of submarines is a second strike deterrent. If Russia were to nuke the continental United States, the subs would fire back. Deterrence doesn't work unless they're always there. So Trump said it, but I don't think anything actually changed in the oceans.
Right, well, what Trump says things, we know that, but Trump says that America is, I quote, fully prepared for a nuclear war with Russia. Looking at who is talking, do you believe these words are a sign of a real strategic deterrent readiness, or rather just a seasoning to famous presidential word salad, and yet another example of irresponsible rhetoric?
Well, the Russians have been engaging in irresponsible rhetoric for 3.5 years. President Joe Biden would never talk this way, would never encourage this kind of language, but Trump just says whatever he wants to say. He likes the attention. And we're seeing the reaction from the Russians, the different style. Medvedev made those comments. This was a week and a half ago. Since then, he's been pretty quiet. So I'm guessing either Putin or someone in the Kremlin said, this isn't going to work on Trump. If you threaten nuclear strikes, he's just going to respond. Even if he doesn't actually do anything, Trump will just say it. So this is a new dynamic that we're all experiencing on social media together.
That's right. Well, the international media, the social media reports, or better said, implies, or even better said, rumors about that the Russian military command is feeding Putin with false intel on combat successes of the Russian army in Ukraine, based on whatever they are based on, but the fact, if this is true, and knowing Putin, that can easily be true, my question in this regard is, when one considers themselves an invincible almighty Russian Tsar with the second large army in the world and a menacing nuclear potential, even if in reality they are nothing more than an outdated Soviet nuclear impotent and not even close to what they think of themselves. That said, feeding on lies that your military command serves you daily, and because of that selective perception pattern based on lies and delusions, can Putin start a global nuclear war anyway because he sincerely believes that what is going to happen? And I mean, right here should be a video that we can't give it to you now for technical reasons, but this is the video where he says that we are going to go to heaven as a martyrs and they all just gonna croak and bite the dust and die.
Конечно, это катастрофа всемирная.
So it will be collective work for them. Of course, this is a global catastrophe. But I repeat, we cannot be the initiators of this catastrophe because we do not have a preventive strike. Yes, in this situation, we are kind of waiting for someone to use nuclear weapons against us. We ourselves are not doing anything. But then the aggressor, he still must know that retaliation is inevitable, that he will be destroyed. And we are victims of aggression. And we, as martyrs, will go to heaven, and they will simply die.
For Putin to say that, I've seen the clip. Putin said that if there is a nuclear war, then Russians will go to heaven and everyone else will just be dead. I don't believe Putin is a particularly religious person who believes in the Christian faith. If he did, he wouldn't be slaughtering hundreds of thousands of people for his own greed and desires. So will a nuclear war happen? And nobody wins a nuclear war. There's nothing to gain. If Russia could benefit on the battlefield in any way the last 3.5 years from using a nuclear weapon, then they would have already done it. But every time you think through the ramifications, the outcomes of using a nuclear weapon, tactical, strategic, inside Ukraine, against a NATO ally, whatever, it doesn't matter. There is no long-term benefits. Life for everyone in Russia, life for Vladimir Putin, will only get more difficult if he uses a nuclear weapon, and that's the reason why he hasn't used one. Concerning false reality, what kind of information is Putin getting up his chain of command? And yes, the defense minister, Belousov, is probably lying to him about battlefield gains, but the top generals are lying to the defense minister, and the field commanders are lying to the top generals, and the ordinary foot soldiers are lying to their unit commanders. This is just how the entire Russian military operates. Henry, I'm going to say this because I say this on every podcast. The Russian military today controls less of Ukraine than they did 3 years ago. All of their battlefield gains in the Donbass region over the last 3 years doesn't make up for the territory they lost in Kherson in September or November of 2022 and Kharkiv in September of 2022. So the Russian military just continues to faceplant and embarrass itself. I give all the credit in the world to the heroes on the front line who have been holding for 3 years. Right. But concerning bad information going up the chain of command, this is inherent in the design of the Russian military. They can't end this because the entire Russian military is based on corruption, fear, and false perception.
Thank you so very much for saying that on our podcast, on our interview. Again, I'm always ready to hear things like that. But going from possible nuclear war back to conventional war, I recently talked to Frank Ledwidge, a senior lecturer in strategy and law at the University of Portsmouth, and he has put it nicely. He said, while Europe invests in speechwriters, Putin invests in missiles. Well, as simple as that. The Kremlin openly builds up its war machine anyway. Even if this is a lies machine, but it's building up and not making a secret out of the effort, actually. So despite significant losses in Ukraine, or maybe because of that, this effort is, what exactly? A long-term strategy of Putin for getting ready to war with NATO? Or a propaganda for domestic audience, for foreign ones? And whatever it is, how realistic you think Russian war plans are, whether it's Ukraine or global?
Putin is never going back to the old status quo. What Putin was as a head of states prior to the full-scale invasion in 2022, Putin is fine with giving up that life. He doesn't have to ever attend another G7 or a UN General Assembly. You know, there's probably close to 100 nations he can never travel to again because he'll be arrested and sent to The Hague. So Putin has gone down this path, and I think he just wants full empire. The maximum extent of the imperial Russian borders prior to 1914.
Right.
Putin last month said this on camera. Anywhere that a Russian soldier's foot has ever stepped, that territory today rightfully belongs to the Russian Empire. And who's in charge of Russia? Vladimir Putin. How convenient is that? Those Baltics, that territory in Poland, parts of Finland, the Caucasus, Moldova, all of Ukraine. Putin believes this is his, and he's willing to bankrupt the Russian state if necessary, send millions of Russian men to their deaths to achieve these goals. And this is all or nothing for Putin. He's either going to get his empire back, or his people are going to have to kill him. His own inner circle is going to have to find a way to remove him. I think that's the most likely way this war ends, but we're going to watch this play out over the next however long it takes.
Okay, it's all in for Putin, but Belarus changes martial law just recently. Now it is, I quote, seriously, any aggression against Russia, whatever that means, may become a formal basis for declaring a war against whoever is the aggressor, or Lukashenko says that he's the aggressor. That said, do you think that these recent Russian-Belarusian joint military, whatever it was, exercises could be a disguise to further joint attack on Ukraine from the north?
No, I think Belarus is supposed to be Russia's best ally. Yet where is the Belarusian military? For 3.5 years, I'm sure Putin has wanted to conscript in Belarus, to have Belarus send their soldiers down from the north or swing around and help in the Donbass region. Iran, I think, has done more to help Russia in this war. North Korea has sent 30,000 troops. That's 30,000 troops more than the Belarusians. So Lukashenko is an opportunist, but he also knows that he's entirely dependent on Putin and the Russian state. Lukashenko's been playing this balance of, I'll say yes to Putin on literally everything I think I can that doesn't destabilize my own country, which will lead to my death and the death of my family. So Lukashenko, I've never been to Belarus. I can only think about what the culture is like there, but people have told me in the capital city of Minsk, it's not like it is in Russia. You don't see Z posters everywhere about the glory of the war and defeating the Nazi West. This war was sold to Lukashenko as a 3-day special military operation, a minor inconvenience for Lukashenko to create this new union state of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. And Lukashenko has to see and feel weakness from Putin, the Russians, the fact that the Russian military cannot even take the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast. So Lukashenko, his public persona, sure, he acts like he's Putin's best friend, but he's been keeping his own people out of this war for 3.5 years.
Okay, let's get back to the United States and Ukraine. The US and Ukraine have agreed upon a joint production of assault drones. Well, Jake, can we start to be cautiously optimistic here and say that this is a transition towards a new phase of partnership, just maybe from supply to joint development, and then maybe to deployment of joint military force?
I think the model has shifted, especially in the last 1.5 years, of what's the best way to support Ukraine. And initially we were saying, we'll purchase new weapons for ourselves. This is our taxpayer dollars paying for brand new weapons. And then we'll donate decommissioned weapons that are ending their service life. They're still very effective at killing Russians, but they are sometimes 30 years old. This is what we did for the first couple of years, but this isn't the best way to supply Ukraine. The better way is just to supply money and let them build up their own defense capabilities, their own domestic production of missiles and drones especially. So we've been racing towards achieving this goal. And I've seen reports that we're very close to Ukraine mass producing their own ballistic missiles, that there won't be any range restrictions on use inside of Russia. And concerning this drone deal, Ukraine is the leader in the world. Every other military in the world right now is behind in developing drone technology. Ukraine is the only country, aside from Russia, that has the knowledge, has the experience, and has been experimenting. They know what works and what doesn't work in this new generation of warfare. So this deal being proposed is capital upfront.
Right.
What's the final deal going to look like? I imagine the United States is going to give Ukraine a lot of money, billions of dollars for their own defense production, and we won't get delivery of these drones,
Right.
whatever they are, until the war is over.
Right,
The war has to end first, because obviously all of Ukraine's drone production is needed domestically to fight this war. But if we can get an end to the conflict, these factories are going to keep producing,
Right.
and they can start delivering drones with
right.
supplies and parts and training, whatever, to NATO and Western militaries, including the United States. The U.S. military wants this knowledge and experience, and getting it from Ukraine is the best choice right now.
Right, well, this was my question. How is this drone deal good for United States? So now you explained it. So if I fine-tune my question again, are we saying here that there are some advantages of Ukrainian drones over American ones? Is that true?
Yes, I mean, American drones, we've got the big one, like Global Hawk or Predator.
Right, right.
Those have been, that's technology that's been around for 15 years. But the smaller drones that private companies have developed for the U.S. military, like the Switchblade 300 or the Switchblade 600, they're very expensive. They're effective, they work, but in a real war, if the United States were to get into one in which battlefield conditions become comparable to Ukraine and Russia, the costs of what we have developed in the United States are just too high.
Sure.
We have to bring down the per unit costs and increase their effectiveness. And the Ukrainians, they're fighting for their land, they're fighting for their lives. So what's the expression? Necessity breeds innovation.
Right.
And yes, the United States wants this knowledge, experience, expertise, and when the war is over, Ukraine's going to play a very vital role in upgrading the capabilities, especially among drones, of NATO militaries.
Well, amen to that. But what signal this drone deal sends to Russia and China, if it is a signal in the first place?
That despite Donald Trump's rhetoric and his best efforts upon coming into office, the United States' natural allies are the G7 and NATO.
Right.
Not China, not Russia. I understand Donald Trump wants to usher in this new geopolitical world in which it's governed by, we're going to do whatever is best for America. Donald Trump doesn't care about democracy. He doesn't care about human rights. He wants to wheel and deal and do business with anyone if he thinks it benefits himself and the United States. I understand that argument, but at the same time, the Russians and the Chinese, you can't trust them. They don't respect or view America favorably, and they are our natural allies. Right. Our natural enemies.
Well, come on.
Our natural allies are the G7
We'll cut
and
that
other
part out,
democracies
don't
around
worry.
the world. It took Trump a couple of months to get there, but I think he's finally coming around.
Okay, back to Trump's statements. Trump's statements on productive talks of his envoy to the Kremlin, Steve Witkoff, and a, may I say, looming in the fog trilateral meeting with Putin and Zelenskyy and Trump. Do you think, Jake, we're witnessing real diplomatic effort here and progress, or is it just a public relations and that's it?
No, Putin is just stalling for time. Putin loves just messing with Trump. Trump is so easy to manipulate. All you have to do is flatter or give him a compliment, and you can buy another 2 weeks. Trump, for 7 months now, has just been tacoing out. He keeps saying the Russians have to agree to a ceasefire, the Russians have to end this war. Putin is never going to stop the war, but Donald Trump will take these overtures and just say, okay, well, the Russians are engaging in good faith, I think. I'll give them another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks. This bilateral or trilateral meeting, it's a media spectacle. Trump just wants to meet up with Putin because the cameras and the pictures will be on him. Whether there is fruitful or productive talk, I guarantee there won't be, but if there is progress being made or not, Trump just wants the attention. Trump desperately wants to maintain good relations with Russia and good relations with Putin because he thinks Russia is a wealthier state, that he has more opportunities to do business with. Trump Trump doesn't care about Ukraine. Let's just be honest.
Yes,
but
we know.
Ukraine is very important to the European security of the entire continent, and Trump has been pressured. Trump has been spoken to by European leaders. All of these successive meetings of the British Prime Minister, the French President, the German Chancellor, everybody going to the White House, repeating the same message of we have to do something to make Russia stop this war. So we are making progress. I think Putin is not a negotiator. When treaties are signed to end wars, the head of state shows up last. We've made no progress in these direct talks between Ukraine and Russia and Istanbul, so there's nothing to sign. This isn't going to lead to anything productive, but we will get a meeting, there will be pictures, there will be videos. Trump loves that. I think nothing will come of it, but Trump wants his moment in the spotlight. Potentially this is happening in Dubai.
Right. Well, let us speculate. What are the risks for Ukraine? Ukraine will face from taking part in this hypothetical trilateral negotiations, if this happens. Trump says, okay, Putin is ready to meet. Shall Zelenskyy take that?
What I tell my audience is Ukraine and Europe, you're on your own. You cannot rely on or depend on the United States. Anything that the United States under Donald Trump is willing to do as far as tariffs or sanctions or selling weapons, you have to view that as bonus.
Right.
We want it. Zelenskyy will say or do anything to flatter or have good relations with Trump because he understands that American weapons or increased sanctions will help defeat the Russians faster.
Sure.
But Zelensky's just going with it. He's not going to ever be adversarial or controversial with Trump. He doesn't want to burn any bridges with the United States. But at the same time, I can't imagine what Zelenskyy thinks or expects after everything Trump has said and done the last 6 or 7 months. But as far as engaging with the Russians, I think Zelenskyy will seize every opportunity to call Putin out and show that Putin is weak. If Putin doesn't go to this meeting, if Putin doesn't negotiate, perhaps Zelenskyy thinks this will be a demoralizing effect on the Russian soldiers. If Putin is not willing to explore options to end the war, why, if you're a Russian soldier on the front lines, would you be willing to fight and die for Putin if Putin's not really trying to find a way to achieve Russia's objectives through nonviolent means? We know the truth, Henry, but
yes, we know.
We're going to watch this play out.
Yeah, but it's not just Trump. Recent statements by US officials, including Marco Rubio. I know this is one team, of course, or one family, but all these concessions expected from both sides, concessions. Is that how US pressures Kiev towards ending the war in Ukraine at whatever the cost of this ending is for Ukraine?
There's no concessions from Ukraine at this point. The Russians are saying we won't agree to a ceasefire until all the oblasts that we annexed under our constitution are under our control. Ukraine is never going to abandon the city of Zaporizhia, 700,000 people. Ukraine is never going to let the Russians just cross the river and take Kherson back, pre-war population 300,000 people. What the Russians are demanding, Ukraine will never agree to because no nation would. So this isn't going to go anywhere, and Donald Trump, he just wants to keep playing it out, keep dragging it out, when there's only one outcome. There's only one way that Donald Trump can steer the United States, and that's to align with the objectives of the G7 and our NATO allies, increase sanctions and increase weapon deliveries to Ukraine. If Trump wants to end this war, that's the only way it can be done, with strength and overwhelming force. The Russians will never engage in good negotiations in good faith, and they will never settle for anything less than the full borders of Ukraine, in my opinion.
Well, for Ukraine, we agree on that, absolutely. But for the West, these concessions, Ukrainian concessions, for the West, where does it end? Russia says, we want Donbass, we want Kherson, Kharkiv, Crimea, and 50% of Marco Rubio's property in Miami. Then what? Where do you think that thin red line lies for the West? And is there any thin red line in the first place?
When we say the West, I mean, I think perhaps in the first year and a half of the war, maybe there were heads of states on the European continent who would have been willing to settle. Just say Ukraine, agree to give this up, agree to recognize this, never join NATO, blah, blah, blah. That might have been offered, and the Russians still would have said no.
Right.
So
well,
I think people are understanding that you cannot negotiate with Vladimir Putin.
Really?
He doesn't want to talk.
I mean,
he wants to waste time, but there is no deal. There is no deal.
There is no deal. So you believe that Zelensky's vocal and clear skepticism on Russian peace initiatives is justified? Is that right?
Zelensky understands exactly what's happening here. This is a genocide. The Russians are hunting women, children, elderly people, human safari. They're blowing up hospitals. They're blowing up schools. They're blowing up, home repair stores, coffee shops, churches. The Russians don't care. This is a genocide. The goal is to wipe Ukraine clean and then repopulate it with proper Russians. This was an article in TASS last week.
Right.
No Ukrainian should be left alive. This is Russian state media just openly calling for genocide. So you can't engage in good faith. There is no misunderstanding that you can clear up to achieve peace on this border. Only overwhelming strength will bring this war to a close.
Well, Jake, I can't help it but asking, I have a feeling that with all these peace negotiations, we're moving towards the Minsk 2.0. With these, just another monkey job that Russians simply will spit at, just as they did with any other agreement, law, truce, or ceasefire ever agreed with the Kremlin. I could be wrong, but the question is, if really any sort of agreement actually achieved, is there a viable way to make Russians stick by it?
Let's talk about a hypothetical here. If there was a true ceasefire that the Russians wanted because they thought it was to their benefit,
right.
Russia only does things that they think is to their benefit. I think long-term Russia is screwed. I think the wheels have been set in motion economically and demographically, where Russia doesn't have much of a future. Their decline of their economy is only going to get worse. Russia has survived the last 3.5 years with Putin depleting the wealth fund of Russia. He's been robbing the economic security of Russia's future, their state wealth funds, their pension funds, to buy tanks and missiles that don't offer any economic benefits to the people of Russia. So there's been this sugar rush of these large sign-up bonuses, these large soldier salaries.
Right.
But it's caused horrendous inflation. Central bank rates are through the roof. And we're seeing the economic collapse play out now. The next 6 months are going to get wild. Every industry in Russia is currently going bankrupt. The steel companies, the coal companies, the oil and gas companies, the banks, the airlines, the shipping companies. Nothing is operating at a profit. It's not good business. It's not good capitalism. And if there were to be a ceasefire, either the Kremlin continues paying all these companies to keep going, or they reduce military spending, which would just hasten their economic collapse. The theory being is that Putin has to keep this war going because if he stops it, if soldiers stop getting these exorbitant salaries, Putin can't pay these salaries forever. If there was a freeze in the conflict, soldiers' salaries would have to go down, but inflation has already wrecked everything, made the cost of food and housing, and I just read that gasoline in Russia is at an all-time high. So economically, Russia cannot find a way out of this, and a freeze in the conflict actually might hasten their economic collapse as opposed to prevent it.
Well, all right, many questions. I like how you clear the fog for our audience. Everyone loves you, we know that. But and the last one for today. Gubernatorial and state legislative ballots in the United States in November 2025, isn't it? As well as mayoral races in some states. Do you expect it to have any effect in any way at military aid in particular and support for Ukraine in general?
No, I don't think so. If you're talking about upcoming elections here in the United States, Ukraine, this is what I have focused my life on now, making these update videos and trying to find ways to defeat Russia and support Ukraine. But for the average American, they're concerned about other issues to a greater extent. When you poll, do you have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of Russia or Ukraine? It's consistently like 70-10. So the overwhelming supermajority of Americans, they understand Russia is the aggressor, Putin is evil, and that Ukraine is our natural ally and we should be supporting them. But as far as when they go to the polls, who do they vote for mayor or governor or congressman? There's just other issues that Americans think about and care about more day to day, and that's going to drive how they vote in upcoming elections here in the United States.
Fair enough, isn't it? Well, thank you so very much for shedding some light at that mayhem and what's going on. And Jake, our audience around the world appreciates that. Trust me, me included. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Thank you. Goodbye. My name is Henry Keane. We are IUA TV, and we just had a lovely conversation with an expert, United States Air Force veteran who served as a nuclear and missile operations officer, Jake Broe. Please subscribe and stay tuned for more. Goodbye.